Welcome to the August 10th, 2021 regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives from the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and that's it tonight. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name and address for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt this meeting, please either switch it to silent mode or turn it off. At this time, I'd like to ask the Planning Commission Secretary to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krant?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Here.
Ms. Parakis?
Here.
Mr. Rahman?
Here.
Mr. Roush?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here. Thank you. Next item is approval of tonight's agenda. Do we have a motion for that? Mr. Tagle, and a second from Mr. Faison. Roll call, please.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item is approval of the minutes from the July 27th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion for that? Mr. Hudson, and a second from Mr. Lambert. Roll call, please.
Mr. Krant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes.
Ms. Parakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Roush?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Preliminary site plan review, file number SP 2021-0003, proposed the Alcove site improvements east side of Livernois, south of Big Beaver, 2600 Livernois, section 27, currently zoned MF, multifamily residential zoning district.
I
Savage.
typically turn to my right and this guy here presents, but as we talked about, he's not here this evening, so I'm going to present.
Okay.
It's good to be back in person.
Yes, it is.
And
it's lovely.
without IT here and without, so.
Yeah.
You all probably remember this project. It's a project to convert the Hawthorne Suites located on Livernois south of 75 from an extended stay hotel to a multifamily apartment. There's 151 extended stay units now, and they're proposing to retain that same number. There'll be 151 units. As part of the conversion, they're proposing a wide range of improvements, including landscaping, architectural improvements to the existing buildings, and 25 additional off-street parking spaces. With the additional spaces, they will exceed required parking by 3 spaces. In terms of land use and zoning, the property is zoned multifamily. To the east, the zoning is multifamily, the use is multifamily. To the south, the zoning is single family, the use is single family. To the west, across Livernois, the zoning is Big Beaver and the use is commercial. And to the north is I-75. And we discussed this in May. The item was postponed and no action was taken. As you remember, it had to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals for 2 variances, which the applicant received. They were missing site landscaping calculation. That was provided. They were asked to submit a landscape plan with sufficient plant density to adequately screen the entire southern property line. The landscape plan is somewhat unclear. The tree stamps for the icons for the trees don't match up with the table that shows what what the requirements are. So the applicant's here and can clarify that difference. The landscape plan shows alternative 1 and 2 screening based on plant size, and it's just a little confusing, and we need some clarification on that. We asked that the plan be stamped by a registered architect, which it is, and we asked the applicant to provide a higher quality material than what was originally proposed in May, which was vinyl, and improve the buildings, which we've got some renderings here. They've done that. They replaced the first floor vinyl with fiber cement board and batten siding, and they're also proposing to renovate the exterior of the clubhouse with fiber cement board, batten siding, and stone. Again, I'll show some elevations here in a second. So this is the existing apartment, and this is a rendering of the improved buildings with the improvements I just mentioned. This is the existing clubhouse, administration office for the extended stay hotel, and this is the after shot with the improved materials. So a pretty nice facelift, all things considered. So with that, we asked the applicant to clarify the screening along the southern property line and modify at the request of the Planning Commission. But with that, we would recommend preliminary site plan approval. I think it's we talked about some of the challenges that we have with this site today, and this is a much needed improvements to this property.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Savadant? Seeing none, we'll ask the applicant to come up and let us hear about your project and, of course, the screening on the south side especially.
Sure. Brian Pritchard, I'm the CEO and founder of TriCap Residential Group. We're the sponsor and the applicant this evening. With regard to the discrepancies with the tree sizes and the diagram, as Mr. Savadant represented, the ambiguity is unintentional, and it is our intention to provide adequate screening to your guys' satisfaction along that line. And so I think the most appropriate action, and you can tell me otherwise, would be to work with planning or work with Mr. Savadant to figure out exactly what that screening should be, and then we could move forward and clarify the plan accordingly. If you guys have other suggestions, we're certainly open to that as well.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Go ahead, Ms. Malala Holly.
Thank you for coming. Just a quick question. I know we've talked about the exterior and everything. Nothing was mentioned about the interior. Curious to know what kind of improvements you're looking at, because many of those are suites, which means there is probably some kind of kitchen areas that you have to create. Just sort of curiosity, how is this getting improved upon from inside?
Sure. So one of the first things that we do is we kind of de-hotel the property, which means drapes, desks, phones, secured headboards, that type of things, and any kind of furniture will be removed from the units. And then we'll go back and replace older carpet and laminate flooring, and in a lot of instances, a ceramic tile with either upgraded carpet or like a vinyl wood plank flooring in the interior. We'll paint all of the units. In some instances, the existing cabinets, kitchen cabinets were upgraded and are in adequate condition. In most, they're not, and so where appropriate, we'll replace the kitchens and countertops and appliances, and then we'll repaint and provide new light and electrical lighting fixtures and plumbing fixtures.
Thank you. No, just out of curiosity,
Sure.
I wanted to get some information on that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Faison.
I was curious, have you done another project like this where you've taken a hotel or a suite hotel and converted it to
Not with the
apartments?
hotel. This is really kind of just happening in the marketplace, and in our opinion, as a result of COVID and specifically the changes in business travel that have happened, or the decrease in business travel, the hotel industry needs constant investment in properties in order to keep them, up to speed with their competitors, and that's not available in the marketplace today. And there's also a lack of demand for extended stay or just hotels in general. So, and an increased demand in apartments. And so we're finding this niche where we can come in and take an underutilized property that needs investment such as this and convert it to a multifamily use that, where there's a market demand for boutique and bespoke type property and smaller units for this type of client.
Thanks. And then just one quick follow-up, your target market.
Not really age specific. You know, I could see the spectrum here being anywhere from younger, out of college, just getting started in the workforce, all the way up through potentially even retired and downgrading from a larger home and just looking for something local that they can rent because there's family in the area. I don't anticipate a lot of families in here just based on the unit sizes, singles, couples, you know, divorced moms or dads, that type of clientele.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Roush.
Yes, Mr. Pritchard, I had a couple of things. On the Livernois boundary, the one day I drove by, I've been by the place a number of times. The one time I drove by, there's like two buildings on the north that face Livernois. But I believe there's only one that really has a balcony, so to speak, that faces Livernois. They're really not truly balconies because they're like a
Juliet balcony.
It's a railing with a door wall in front of a door wall, which is great, except for when I drove by it, you know, people were hanging stuff off of it, and it really didn't look very attractive at all.
Yeah.
And there's no landscaping on that berm. There's a really nice berm there, and you've got a lot of nice trees that kind of screen the buildings to the south. Is there a chance of you guys doing some landscaping that would kind of account for that northern building?
Yeah, potentially. I think, you know, the easier way to do that, we view that hanging things off the balcony as more of a management problem than we do a aesthetic or architectural problem. And we don't think this property is very well managed today. And when you bring in a professional manager and you bring in the clientele today is much more transient than we would anticipate. And so when you bring people that are paying real money, you know, and looking to live in a nice apartment community, number one, they're not really hanging things off the balcony, and then secondarily, our management team and maintenance team that's on site every day would just not allow that to happen.
So it'll be part of the lease.
I'm sorry?
You'll say it'll be part of the lease that they won't be able to do that kind of thing.
Definitely, yeah, those type of things are part of
And
it.
then the next one was, do you plan on doing anything with the wood fence along 75? It's kind of old and worn. Are you going to paint it or stain it or do anything
Painting
with it?
for sure. You know, I don't think that we're going to replace the whole thing, but we'll paint it and then repair as necessary.
Great. And then my last question is a little bit more difficult, and that is, there's no sidewalk between your internal sidewalks and the sidewalk on Livernois. There's a stretch there for the distance of a building plus, so I don't know if it's, I don't know if that's 100 feet, it might be 50 or 75 feet. It's really kind of a hazard not to have a sidewalk that connects the two, because there's no way of getting to the sidewalk except for walking in your street.
For 100, you know, I'm not familiar with that section of it specifically. You know, I don't think that we have an issue providing.
You can see it on the plan. Mr. Savidan can pull it up there.
Yeah, I was going to look at the aerial as well.
I believe it shows up in the applicant's site plan as well.
Okay.
I would say just generally, that's something we're certainly open to working with and making that connection. I don't think we have a problem. One of the things I would want to know is that even our land, you know, and where does our property line end and the city or an easement begin?
You can see there, I have to believe it's your land because it's right where his cursor is.
So if the report doesn't mention it, good catch.
Yeah.
So it is required.
Okay.
So the quick answer is that I'm sure the applicant would work with us, and if you wanted a condition approval on that sidewalk connectivity, that would be something
we
that.
have no issue with that, thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Good catch.
Thank you, Mr. Savidan.
Very good. Anyone else? Mr. Lambert?
When I watched the ZBA meeting, when they came up with the variances, I noticed that there was at least one resident who was just to the south of you who came and spoke very much in favor of the project. Based upon that, and also upon, I think at your previous meeting with us, you kind of said you had some feedback from the neighbors to the south. Do you have some ideas about what the neighbors would like to see as far as whether landscaping or a wall, maintaining the wall there?
Luke, Luke met with the neighbors directly, so
Okay.
maybe you can address that question.
Good evening. Luke Bonner with the Bonner Advisory Group. Yeah, actually had the pleasure of walking the neighborhood a couple of times, and the biggest concern or excitement overall was that the property was going to be acquired and improved and managed properly. Almost everybody that I spoke with in person there was really concerned about crime and safety. Those were the biggest issues that came up. We had a few questions about screening, landscape screening, which is part of our plan. So we just let them know, look, we're going to maintain that privacy wall as well. We'll fix it where it needs to be fixed, and we'll make sure that we're adding landscaping to areas that, kind of give you a little bit of coverage from over there. But other than that, everybody was really excited that it was going to be cleaned up and much safer. Thank you.
Anyone else? I just had one quick question. What's the price point for these apartments?
$950 to $1,200-ish, that range.
That's what the market.
Yeah, that's really where it is today.
what it says.
Ultimately the market dictates, but that's what our market studies say it should be.
Any other questions for the applicant? If not, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Back to the commission for a discussion and resolution, please.
I have a question.
Sure.
Mr. Savidan, so the landscaping that will be required along the southern boundary where the wall's at, is that a minimum of like a 6-foot screening height?
Yeah, so good question. So let's get into that a little bit. So the property was developed some time ago prior to the 2011 comprehensive rewrite of the zoning ordinance. And prior to 2011, Mr. Lambert, I see him nodding his head. I think he'll remember that we used to be very uncreative when it came to buffering. We required what was called a zoning wall, which is what we have here along the southern property line. So that met the old standard, but then in 2011, when we updated the zoning ordinance, the Planning Commission felt that it would be more appropriate to eliminate the requirement for a wall and fulfill that buffering with just purely landscape material, but they could augment it with a combination wall and landscaping if it was appropriate. So this met the landscaping requirement at the time because it was a wall, and there was also a few trees in there. It doesn't conform to the standards of today, but what it does do, the wall, it does shield the properties to the south from headlights, which is very, very important. So although it's non-conforming, it's really the planning commission's call. The way that we look at non-conformities like this is ideally in a perfect world, full compliance with the existing criteria is something that's the perfect scenario. But in this instance, there's a 4-foot wall there which satisfies a lot of the screening those headlights. So if it was appropriate to the Planning Commission, they could provide less than alternative A and alternative B, which is essentially a staggering of coniferous trees along the entire property. The staggering of the trees allows blockage of the headlights, which again in this case they're not going to be as impactful because the wall's there. So what's reasonable? That's to be determined by a majority of the Planning Commission this evening.
Very good. Any thoughts on that, Mr.
Yeah,
Rao?
so my question was raised really because of more so one other thing that I saw recently that I hadn't noticed originally. Originally, I was more concerned with the developer applicant's responsibility to screen from his use from the residents. But in looking at the aerials of the residences that are abutting this property, there is one that is really not attractive at all. And if I was the applicant, I would want to screen from that backyard because it's like a junkyard. And I think that it's in everybody's best interest that in that section of the wall, the eastern side, the screening be in accordance with Plan A or Plan B.
Yeah, I think we talked about that at the first meeting, but we couldn't take any action. There are some trees there, and I think it would be appropriate to fill in some of those missing gaps. And it's an interesting point raised about Sometimes the buffering is in place to cut the other way, to screen the more intense use from the neighbors. That's obviously in the best interest of the apartment complex to do that.
Very good. We have a resolution. Since Mr. Roush had so many good points, you want to pull it together?
I can try.
Go for it.
Mr. Chairman, I would move that the preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Article 8 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the Alcove site improvements located at the east side of Livernois, south of Big Beaver, 2600 Livernois, Section 27, currently zone MF, multifamily residential district, be granted subject to the following. Clarify the proposed screening along the southern property line and modify to include screening acceptable to planning staff in Form A or B in order to appropriately screen residences at the on the southern boundary along the eastern edge. Also, to install a sidewalk connecting the internal sidewalks to the sidewalk on Livernois. Is there anything else?
I don't think so.
That would be it then, Mr.
Very
Chair.
good. Second for that? Or any modifications? Go ahead, second first, go ahead. Mr. Lambert, okay. Now, Mr. Lambert has a second. Any discussion on the resolution? Go ahead, Ms. Malala Holly.
Yes, I second that.
Oh, it was already seconded.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Didn't see that, sorry.
It's just at the point if after we move the resolution to now any discussion on the resolution, and then we can have a vote.
None from us.
Okay. None? Okay, then I guess we're ready for a vote.
Mr. Lambert,
Yes.
Ms. Malala Holly,
Yes.
Ms. Parakis,
Yes.
Mr. Rahman,
Yes.
Mr. Roush,
Yes.
Mr. Tagle,
Yes.
Mr. Faison,
Yes.
Mr. Hudson,
Yes.
Mr. Krent.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing such a well-designed project. Yep, we are too.
Mr. Chairman, just to note, it's always a pleasure working with applicants who listen.
Yes.
Beginning with meeting with the neighbors numerous times and, listening to suggestions in terms of, from the Planning Commission staff and ZBA in terms of making the project better. So always a pleasure when it's a two-way street.
I agree. And thank you for being the other side of the two-way street. Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. We're moving on to the next item, which is public comments for items on the current agenda. Seeing none in the audience for that, we'll move on to the next item, which is Planning Commission comment. I'll start with this side of the table. Mr. Savinot, do you want to start it?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Dufresne?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Mr. Faison?
Nothing.
Mr. Tagg?
No thanks.
Nothing for me. Go ahead, Mr.
No, thanks.
Nothing for me.
Nothing.
I'm going to just take a second.
Sure.
If you don't mind. I missed everyone at that training session, but I was able to see it. I watched all of it yesterday and today, and I also watched the meeting that I missed because I was on vacation. So I just wanted to take a second because I noticed that all of you kind of spoke on it during your planning commissioner comment at the previous meeting. So I wanted to take just a second to let you know my thoughts on that training. First of all, thanks for putting that together for whoever was involved in doing that because I thought it was really beneficial. I might not be the newest member, but I'm definitely a new member and I had a lot to learn and I thought it was really informative. I did take a lot of notes and I do want to share some of those. Maybe Mr. Savidan, I'll be contacting you and Mr. Carlisle with some of my ideas, but what I thought was really interesting about the training session was that I know we talked about already identifying, working on nodes and things and not doing a whole full review and sort of being targeted, but I thought that they gave us a lot of really great ideas in terms of using the missing middle housing I thought that there were so many different ideas. I think they listed 7 different housing options that we could actually look at and use them in those nodes, and also to address some of the issues that we've had for a long time regarding seniors and millennials and trying to find affordable and attainable housing for those sectors. So I think that if we're creative and willing to do something maybe a little bit different, I like the idea of maybe doing sort of pilot ideas with limited permitting, limited permits to try things in certain areas. I think that could work, and to maybe open up our eyes and try something new that we might not have thought of. I know for me, I thought he put up a lot of pictures and different ideas that I thought, wow, maybe we should be considering something like this, something that I probably would have thought, a week ago, no way would that fly. But I think that we should be creative in trying to fit that missing middle to find some creative solutions for the residents. So I'm excited to move forward on that. So those were my thoughts on the training.
Mr. Roush?
No, thank you.
Ms. Malala Holly?
No comment.
Okay, then we're adjourned.